Hey, YouTube world. So I just wanted to make a quick reaction video to the conversation between Chip from Vegan Power Lab and Raffaela from the Militant Vegan channel. There was one section in it, I didn't get to watch it live, unfortunately, but one section in it kind of stood out to me when I watched the replay of it. So I just wanted to kind of go over this part and just share my thoughts and what I agree with and maybe some things that I disagree with. And I haven't watched this part too carefully, but it seems like kind of this is one of the kind of juicier segments within their discussion. So this shouldn't be a terribly long video. It's about I want to say like a 15 to 20 minute segment here, and we'll watch it on 1.25 speed. So here goes.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, because I don't think you mentioned that, which definition of veganism do you subscribe to? Is it like lowering animal harm or suffering, or is it against animal exploitation? Or I feel like everybody kind of has a different understanding of it, slightly different, obviously about the animals, but which one is specifically?
I think the only one which makes sense when you try to logically engage in this debate is the logical extension of human rights must form animal rights. So I learned a lot from Vegan Gains, and I adhere to his position on that, which I think he still puts very much more eloquently than I do. Violence needs a justification, and animal rights are the logical extension of human rights.
So this is a definition that I've told people that I hold in the past. And I know that Vegan Gains is kind of credited with this definition in many instances. I know that there have been times when I've told people, yeah, it's just an extension of human rights. People are like, oh, kind of like a Vegan Gains-esque definition. So let's see what Chip thinks about this. From what I've heard from Chip, I think he characterizes it more as a non-commodification of other animals. So let's see what he says.
I see myself as a threshold deontologist. So yes, there is a situation where I would gut you and steal all your organs to make one person or a million person healthier. But I think it is a huge, it's a very, 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 very specific scenario. And I would have to look at everything until I get to harm an innocent person. So it's difficult to say which point I would think it's okay to use somebody's body for the greater good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a threshold deontologist as well, but my threshold is guiltiness. If somebody's not guilty, then they should never ever.
I think guiltiness.
So it sounds like there's this differentiation between a position that Chip holds, even though they're both in the TD camp. It sounds like Chip is saying that he would not violate the rights of someone who's innocent, whereas Raffaela is saying that potentially the benefit could make that a worthwhile sacrifice, if you will.
This is difficult sometimes because
it's guiltiness. It's difficult to measure, yeah.
Yeah, because Vegan Gains, I think, puts it too simple sometimes, and that's definitely something that I also have to think about still on how I want these questions to be answered. But he says that, for example, when it comes to crop deaths or defending your food, the perpetrator of your apple, like the bee or whatever, or even a hamster, they're guilty. And I don't see yeah, but that's exactly what I say. He says it's fine, and I wouldn't say that that's the reason. I think is it bad luck in a situation? I think if we both sit on an island and there's nothing to eat other than your body or my body, respectively, that I do have a justification for killing you, but I don't think that it would be right to kill and eat you. So
exactly.
I think the moment that I hurt you, even for my survival, to take your body directly, that is a rights violation.
So this is a little bit weird because this has never really sat well with me when it comes to the whole survival and being on a deserted island situation, because we're saying that something is justifiable, yet we're saying that it's wrong, which seems to be a contradiction, right? If we say that, oh, well, I could justify it in some way, but it still doesn't make it right, then you haven't justified it in any way. Or is it just like a little right because you have one justification instead of multiple justifications? I mean, as far as my understanding is that you just need one justification for something to be justified. So this is a little bit strange.
But there are scenarios where I think, okay, what if I want to harvest an apple, but you also want to harvest the apple? Then I can stab and kill you to eat the apple.
Sharing resources, yeah.
But so I cannot hold it down to only guilt. I think it's intention that plays a lot into the role of how I would value a certain action. And we definitely have to also think of things that come from non-intentional harm. But I think we can only find the best solution for even these questions that already arise when a world accepts animal rights as they do human rights as a foundation. So we should think of that. We should talk about that like we do right now. But it starts with making everyone vegan and aware that there is a problem in the suffering of sentient beings.
I'm really glad that she said this. It kind of shows that even though somebody like her, who presumably, I think she does hold the kind of odd order predator culling position, that she does recognize that it's not pertinent to the world at this time. So that is refreshing to hear.
I completely agree. Like there's obviously like a lot of cases, or I want to call them edge cases, where you can justify doing harm or violating somebody's rights or whatever other cases there are, and you can try to explore morality in those situations and be like, well, is it moral? I don't know if it's moral. Is it justified? I don't know. Like for me personally, I have very much difficulty differentiating. Well, not differentiating because I understand the difference, but rather defining the difference between is it moral or is it justified, right? Because
that's an interesting question from Chip. Sorry, and it sounds like he's touching on something that I had actually wanted to explore, which is this idea of whether something can be moral and not ethical. As far as I understand it, morality has to do more with whether something is kind of more societally acceptable or accepted, whereas ethics is kind of more scientific, if you will. And when he's talking about this dichotomy between morality and justifiability, I think that's kind of what he's touching on.
It's very difficult for me to define the difference between these two. Like, okay, but if it's justified, what does that mean? Does that mean that it's moral in that situation? But anyway, like we both agree that in certain situations it is what it is. And it's interesting, you subscribe more to the idea of rights. I agree with that. Like, I agree that there's fundamental rights that all animals should have. But I think I subscribe personally. Well, I think the biggest issue is the exploitation of animals, and I think animals should not be exploited. So I'm against.
It's interesting that he said that there are certain rights that all animals should have rather than do have. I think I would land somewhere in between, where I would say that there are intrinsic rights that are non-tangible, obviously, that we either recognize or ignore. It's just an interesting distinction there.
Against exploitation of animals. But yeah, in that sense, I'm also against exploitation of humans, of course, right? So
I don't like the word exploitation because I don't even want to say in a capitalistic system, but in any system, even in a relationship, where does exploitation start? How does consent play into it? What if there's an alternative where they would alternatively be more exploited? Does that make it just to exploit a little? So I don't like the word exploitation. If you're
This is something that I've heard from Paul Bashir, the co-founder of Anonymous for the Voiceless, as well, where he says, maybe for a different reason, but he says that when you talk to non-vegans about exploitation, they think of more human rights related situations. I don't know if he referred to specific examples, but maybe like something like human trafficking, for example, and things like that. The exploitation question is also a little bit troubling because humans do get exploited through things like capitalism. With an employer relationship, oftentimes there can be some kind of exploitative element to that, but I don't think that necessarily makes us complicit with that exploitation. If we go and, for example, buy something from a business whose employees are exploited, it can be a matter of degrees. There can be some nuance here. These are some troubling implications of the anti-exploitation model. I think maybe commodification is therefore a better term that we should start to use more.
Here you have to pay a fucking rent. You never chose to be here. Does that make you being exploited for the whole system? I think the word exploitation doesn't work because it always leads to people saying, but we're also exploited. What about the sweatshops? It's too much.
I agree. But like also rights, right? Do rights encompass consent? That's what I'm curious, because like I would say you could argue that there is a case when animals are given rights, but they are also used against their consent, or what somebody may say, well, he got consent or something, right? Like you mentioned vegan gains, right? Like riding horses, and he mentions consent training. I don't think that's consent, but I don't want to talk about vegan gains too much. But like my point is that like getting consent from an animal because we can't communicate with them properly is just us interpreting what consent could possibly be, right?
So like I said, it's a an expansion of human rights. So you could bring up the same examples when it comes to a child, and
Fair.
you usually say the child doesn't want to go to the doctor, they don't want to be vaccinated, they'd rather play video games and eat chips all day. Now, is it against the child's consent to give it a vegetable and to get it vaccinated? In that moment, probably yes, but you're acting in the best wish, like I don't know how to say it in English, im mutmaßlichen Willen, in the wish of the child's.
Yeah.
I think she's saying that you're acting kind of in the best interest of the child. I still don't know that it is something that we can apply to other animals when we do have a perfectly viable option of leaving them alone and not riding them, whereas human child is completely dependent on us.
That you're a caregiver, and you have to be a caregiver of animals too. And if there is a situation, and I never heard that before talking to vegan gains, where consent training and sitting on a horse to get it to move if it would otherwise not move is fair and in the will of the animal, in its last will, as you have to say.
It's a little troubling that she keeps saying it in reference to not only the horses, but a human child.
Probably not in that moment, but overall. Then I would apply that to animals just in the same way as I would do to humans. And
I agree.
Maybe it's a language thing. I don't want to be insensitive to maybe it's an English as a second language type situation here.
I would apply the same logic, right? Like it's an anti-speciesist approach at the end of the day, right? Like if you wouldn't do it to a human, why would you do it to an animal? I agree with that. I guess it's just like over.
I think Chip's being a little generous here. I think he's being a little too charitable with the anti-speciesism angle, because again, we don't need to do this to horses for them to be healthy. And it's not our job to keep horses healthy, honestly. There's probably a lot of things that other species do to themselves that could be objectively deemed to be unhealthy, but we don't go in and intervene. So this just doesn't seem to hold water, if you ask me.
Overall, kind of how you describe it more, but I think in the particularities we agree on all of it, except for, I don't know, maybe the Culling predators thing we disagree, because I saw your chat with the vegan.
Why do you disagree? You don't want to know. You have to. Sorry, you know who you invite.
We can get into that. We can get into that a bit later, and I can explain exactly my position. I wanted to have a conversation with somebody about it and explain my position, but I think that okay, fuck it. If I'm going to get into this right,
do it live. Just get into it. I love that.
Get into this right now, but let's make it time box, because I know the subject can spiral out of control a lot, right? So my whole point is, you said that if an animal attacks a human being, you would stop the animal, kill, and save the human being, correct?
It depends on the human being.
Yeah, well, let's say an innocent human being. I don't know what to call it, a vegan person.
An innocent vegan activist human being, I would probably save the human. Yeah.
Yeah, but what would you do in the case? I personally think that's already inherently a speciesist, and I'll explain why. But what would you do in a case when a human child has a rabbit in their hand, they're going towards the balcony, and then they don't know any better, but they just want to drop the rabbit, and because they want to see what happens? Would you kill the child to save the rabbit?
Well, it depends on the intention of the child. I don't think that a child can actually think of the consequences here.
Yeah, but neither can a carnivorous animal, right? The carnivorous animals doesn't necessarily care.
But it's like
how the other feels.
But he does it again and again and again, and there's an ill intention. The child I can teach to not throw a rabbit off the roof. So it's like a decision of who of two innocents would I save in a situation, and I don't believe that but in the wild it's not two innocents. It's an ill intention that will repeat. And
I completely disagree. I don't see how there's any ill intention when a carnivorous animal is killing another animal to eat at all. How can there be any ill intention when that's literally what they need to do to survive? Whereas in the case of this child, they don't know what they're doing. They might not know any better. And I would say that they're still innocent. They're both still innocent in the sense that they're not intending to, they're not causing harm for the sake of it. But I would say, and I wouldn't be in favor of killing either of them, just to be clear on that. But I think that the one who is doing something out of necessity could absolutely not be characterized as one who's doing harm with ill intent. I think that's ridiculous.
And there is no way of stopping that. I think you can make a better example for your point. Because
why would you call it ill intent? That's the problem.
Thank
right?
you.
Because the way I see it,
if a child, if a grown human, take a grown human who realizes what will happen with the bunny if he throws it off, then I would throw the human off and save the bunny. Yeah, that's not what I would do because of pragmatical consequences in this species' world and law. But that's what you should do. Yes.
Yeah. So okay. Well, the way I see it, right? Like in my, I guess that's the value that we don't share, and that I seem to have disagreed also when I had this conversation, was that I personally believe when there's two innocent people fighting, or two innocent people, one of them is going to die, both of them being innocent. I think me intervening would not be fair towards any of them. That's just my opinion, regardless of the situation. It wouldn't be moral for me to intervene in the situation. So that's
But they're not, like, one of them, even if he is innocent in that situation, he will do it again and again and again and cause great suffering, and it will not stop in his name. So we had the example before where you and I sat on an island, and I said at some point I would probably be so hungry that I would kill and eat you, and you said that would be wrong, right? I would lose my rights in that situation.
I don't know if, like,
you said that.
Yeah,
like, position?
I'm not changing my position. I said I said I don't know if it's moral or not. We said it's justifiable, right? Like, that's what we said.
Well, I think I worded it wrong. I think the word justifiable and moral need to be used synonymously.
So when she's saying I would lose my rights, I don't know if she's talking about being, like, subject to incarceration in such a scenario or something. I don't think that anyone can lose their rights. I think their rights can either be ignored or recognized. This idea of this action being immoral just because the predatory carnivorous animal is repeating it doesn't make sense to me at all. It's not like they're, even if they hate what they're doing, if they need to do it to survive every time, then they don't become more culpable from a moral aspect.
So let's say it's understandable and relatable, and I would do it because I'd rather do it than die, because I would probably be egoistical in that situation. Morally, I think me abusing with the intention of murdering you and your body to survive, I think is wrong, even though I would understand it. But
even if you're acting on instinct and you're not a moral agent, right? Even if you don't know what you're doing, even if you don't even realize that what you're doing.
It's irrelevant as a consequence to you, right?
It is irrelevant as a consequence to me.
If it's a one-on-one, depending on the situation with humans, especially you and me, then I could say, okay, maybe it's moral, but it's not a one-on-one. It's something that will repeat every single day, or at least like every week. So I think there is a threshold there, definitely, no matter if it's a moral agent or not. And at some point,
I don't see why it's relevant that it repeats. It's like, so how many free passes does each individual get in order to do something that's not considered immoral to survive? It does not make sense to me at all.
If we can prevent it, if we look, the whole discussion doesn't mean, if you come to the point where you say you need to kill carnivores, that doesn't mean that you have to go right now and interfere every single time that this happens, because obviously it's just a very abstract thing that would probably shake ecosystems right now. So even vegans.
So this seems like a little bit of sliding out of needing to be critical about this. So you don't need to do it every time. Okay, this kind of reminds me of, like, the Peter Singer thing about how there could be a case made for why we need to spend every dollar we have donating to charity or something like that, in order to be consistent about our desire to help others and things like that. I mean, what is the position? So we don't need to go out and help every prey animal from a predator killing them, but what we should then somehow eliminate their entire species of the predators? What?
Infighting about this topic and then telling me that I'm not a vegan, I would kill a lion, she wants to kill all lions. They are very bad faith when it comes to this whole topic that is very, very dry, very abstract. We're not there yet as a human species.
So is it dry or is it abstract? Because if something's cut and dry, then it's not abstract. So I'm not following exactly. Not trying to be bad faith myself either. Just trying to understand and check for consistency.
We should be there. We should even be discussing things like ephilism and turning off all suffering as a whole. But
ephilism is wild. If anybody's familiar with ephilism, it's basically the idea. It's like the ephil is like the opposite of life. It's basically the theory, the philosophy that the ending, the cessation of all life would basically be like some kind of viable means of ending suffering, which I think is ludicrous. I mean, life is beautiful. We enjoy being alive in a way that people really don't appreciate. I think, like, so many people, they get to the verge of ending their own lives, and then all of a sudden their whole life flashes in front of them, or they see like what they're doing and they're like, wow, oh my God, if I ended my life, I would completely not get to enjoy, not get to perceive, not get to experience the experience of life at all. And I think there's something beautiful about the capacity to perceive, to experience pleasure, to experience even pain in order to appreciate that pleasure. I think these are all beautiful things. And I think they're going to talk a little bit more about this now from what I remember. So I'll save further comments until then.
if you had the choice here and now, I give you the button to hit the button to take out all carnivores of the planet without having ecological damage, but without causing these rights violations, this harsh suffering, would you push the button?
I guess so. Yeah, I guess so. That's the thing. I agree. So with this argument, I have a very much I have some issues with it, largely practicability, which you also touched upon, right? And I also do have some moral issues with us just going out there and killing them. But if there's a button, if it's as simple as a button where there's no suffering, where they just instantly disappear, and they like it's a different case, right? But like anyway,
but even if they would suffer a bit or much.
So I would not press that button. I appreciate species diversity. I appreciate the evolutionary trajectory of other animals. I in no case want to play God, basically, which is what this conversation is, and end other life. I don't want to holocaust any species of animals. The only species of animal who I would even remotely consider doing that to, wanting to do that to, not actually doing, but would be mosquitoes. That's the only species of animal. But even that, I appreciate their evolutionary trajectory. They serve some kind of purpose. That's not my place to interfere with. That's my humble opinion.
Much in that situation, it would be a lot less than they would cause forever and ever and ever more.
So this is like wanting to be the policeman of the world. Basically, we're saying that she's saying that even if they were killed in a painful way, it would still result in less overall painful deaths, so to speak. Which again, I don't see this as a vegan issue. I don't think that we need to make this about suffering. And I think that it would be a very beautiful outcome if we could get things back to nature. I think that if we ended our farming of animals, restored the natural ecosystems, natural forests and things like that, and brought back those ecosystems, I think that would be a beautiful thing. I mean, otherwise, what's the alternative? Basically, just turning the whole world into a parking lot so that there's no wild animal suffering. I mean, this is absurd, if you ask me.
Even if it would mean gassing all carnivorous animals that are here right now, theoretically speaking, if it happened once and then never again for all the other animals, which is equivalent to that gassing just every single day for those innocents who are being attacked, whose bodies are being abused for someone else, then we should still hit the button, even if it makes suffering. Under the line, it would probably cause less suffering, and especially it will cause less of these direct rights violations.
But then what is the difference? Like, okay, I'll just go here, but then I really want to discuss something else because I've been discussing this argument already a couple of times. So, because I don't see the difference between then any other person, because living involves some form of dying one way or another, right? So then what is the difference between me buying a product that, as you said, there creates some crop deaths and kills somebody and kills a lot of people, right? Because every time I buy it, it kills a lot of people, it kills a lot of individuals. What is the difference between that and a carnivorous meat?
Yeah, you would have to formulate the argument that kills more than not doing it, because if you have crops on a field where there would otherwise be rainforest, you would probably have more death and suffering, especially in the long run on those fields, than you would have with the crop field being there and you having those deaths through harvesting or through pesticides even. So you're not leading to more suffering by buying these products.
I think she meant to say that you would maybe have more suffering in the rainforest as compared to the crop field, or maybe equal or more, or maybe she's just saying that you would have to be able to compare the two. But again, I don't think that this is a salient point, because when you consider our end goals, which at least my end goal is to introduce more, to bring rewilding into the equation here, get 70% of the plant agriculture that's currently happening to zero, because it's happening for the animal ag. And maybe, we would have to increase plant agriculture a little bit over the 30%, of the current level point, because maybe there'd be more people wanting a variety of plant foods. But I think the ideal scenario is that we do have rewilding take place. This is a beautiful vision where we allow life to thrive, and we accept that death is part of it. We accept that predator animals have an evolved relationship with prey animals, where they essentially balance their ecosystems. They help those animals maintain stronger herds. They target like the weaker animals. This isn't pretty. It's not like an ideal scenario, but that's nature. Like, it can suck sometimes, but I don't think that it's our place to give ourselves policemen of the world badges and go in and intervene.
More humanity on the planet probably means less wildlife and leads to less of these rights violations. So no, I don't see it as equivalent.
Yeah, I see your point of view, but like, do you have any way of measuring that would happen, right? It's like saying, let's say you take a...
No, I don't. This is why I don't do activism for we need to do the culling of the carnivores right now. I don't. But if there's a possibility to, then nobody should rip upon the guts of someone else if we can feed them otherwise. And so that's the whole topic.
Can you imagine if vegans did do activism for that cause and went out in fur coats maybe and talked about how we need to kill lions, and people were like, what? I thought you guys were the people who don't want animals to be abused. And we were like, well, they're abusing others. The non-vegans, they would say, they would wonder what the hell these vegans think about them. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine the PR nightmare there?
For me on this, and if you would save a human in that situation, then why not a lion? Why not Excel?
So my point is, like, obviously, if you could reduce suffering, you should reduce suffering, right? Number one. Number two, obviously, if you could theoretically reduce wildlife suffering, you should. But like, my whole point about the argument was that it's impracticable and we shouldn't be promoting it right now. That was my whole point.
Yeah.
I don't think we should even take any measures to reduce quote unquote wild animal suffering. I don't think that's within our purvey as human beings. I don't think it's our place. I just reject that wholesale.
And I wanted to have a conversation about it because I wanted to understand it, explore my values, and explore my views on it, right? Because I need to understand. Obviously, I was born in a world where I've been influenced by speciesist values, right? I want to remove that and try to take this argument apart and try to see it from a different perspective. That's all it is. But
no, that's totally valid, and I do think that topic is a bit valid because it comes up with vegans who have pet snakes or who even go and rescue a pet snake, and they have to be fed, for example, live mouse or cats who have to be fed meat, or they don't. There's vegan cat food, but for snakes, for example, I wouldn't know an alternative. I think Vegan Games mentioned that there's a thought of filtering vegan cat food into the snake, but whatever. Let's say there isn't. So even a vegan might come up and say, yeah, it's the nature. I have to keep this going. And then you could like ask them, would you give it also a human baby? Would you give it a little puppy every day to eat?
I completely agree. Yeah,
but that's the basis of the whole wild animal suffering question that's being opened up there. So you should be able to formulate exactly those principles, even if they're impractical, in order to make practical advice on.
So I think about the snake thing, I'm not an expert in snakes by any means, but I would think that if there's a way to feed a cat vegan food and for them to thrive, I don't see any reason why there wouldn't be the same option to do so for a snake. I don't see why they couldn't be fed some kind of textured protein balls that are fortified with everything that a snake needs to survive and thrive.
How we should or should not keep pets at home, and how they should be fed, and what solutions need to be found. And we cannot find these solutions or even ask these questions if we don't evaluate the whole ethical question here.
Listen, I understand this problem. I completely agree with the problem. I just don't agree with the solution. I just don't think the solution is to call all carnivorous predator species is a good solution.
I don't even think that is Vegan Gain's position. He is not for just do it no matter the consequence. I think, and we have him in the chat here, Richard, if you would have the possibility to hit the button of killing all carnivores right now, if that would cause a whole ecological breakdown, I do not think, but maybe I am wrong on his opinion.
I don't think it's positive. No, but I think yeah, I don't. I want to get away from the subject because it's
yeah.
It's
but
cool.
we can finish it with that now. So Vegan Gains wouldn't push the button if it caused immense suffering and consequences that we wouldn't even be able to calculate. The whole wild animal suffering debate, and I can say it once and for all skeptical vegans listening at this point, it's a very theoretical debate, one that you can have, that should be treated in good faith, not in bad faith. And no, it doesn't mean that we are in favor of shooting all lions always. So yeah.
Yes, and I also think like. My only problem with this, and when I had a conversation with Vegan Gains, is that he said, well, we should kill the carnivores that don't destabilize while not destabilizing the ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's one way of putting it, but I don't know if this solves the issue, right? This doesn't really solve the issue. And I know you are aware about the message that we send as vegans, and it's important that we as vegans probably don't promote the idea that we should be killing other animals, especially given in a context where most humans on Earth do not really understand this perspective of ending suffering, even wildlife suffering, but rather they just see us promoting, oh, we should kill one animal. No, we're not promoting this. Like, that's not what we're saying, right?
Look, there's always the danger that somebody misinterprets you, even though you say totally.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that's basically the part that I wanted to react to, just about the definitions of veganism and the predator culling thing, and the other little minutia there. So anyway, before this video gets too long, we're at the half-hour mark. Those are just my thoughts on it. And yeah, thanks for watching, and hopefully you'll see you guys in another video. All right, take care.